So just a quick thought. I don't know which one of these is creepier. This bitch or this bitch? Alright, so The Conjuring 2 is the follow-up to what happens to be one of my favorite horror movies from the past couple of years, The Conjuring. I thought the original Conjuring was an excellent horror movie. I thought it had some genuinely good scares, and it felt like a classic horror movie. And in this literal sea of shitty horror movies that are coming out nowadays, that is a very rare find. So I was very excited for this new Conjuring movie. And going into this movie, the very first whole 20 minutes of it are very good. It feels very familiar. It feels a lot like the first Conjuring movie, but improved. There's some genuinely terrifying moments in this movie, but then as the movie progressed, it started to feel like they cared more about making the blockbuster versus making the genuinely scary horror movie, and that was a bit of a problem for me. First, I want to talk about the cast. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, they return as Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I'm a big fan of these guys because before the first Conjuring movie even came out, I was kind of a quasi-follower of the real-life Warrens. Like, I just watched their videos on YouTube and stuff like that, looked into the cases they investigated, because that shit's just cool to watch, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily believe half the shit they say, but it's still, it makes for entertaining shit. I think these guys do a very good job as this couple. You know, they seem very, very sincere. They make that relationship believable. They have a very good dynamic between the two of them, so it's good to see them return. The new family in this movie was basically just a photocopy of the family from the first one, minus the dad and minus the good acting. Besides the little girl who is basically like the main, who's brought to the forefront out of the family. She did a very good job, but the mom didn't really feel like she didn't really do well at being the concerned parent. Oh, my child's possessed, what am I going to do? You know, that role that we've seen so many times. She didn't really do that well. And the rest of the kids were just generic kid actors, which we're all accustomed to by now, so it was already kind of starting to decrease a little bit from the first one, and I try not to go into sequels like expecting it to be as good as the first one. I like to have a different experience as long as it's for the better in the second movie, and when I'm introduced to these new characters and everything, it started to feel a little bit lesser and lesser and lesser as the movie went along. As far as the story goes in this movie, and I know it's supposed to be based on truth, but you can take some artistic license. You know, like they made the perfect storm based on a true story. They know nothing about what happened out in the ocean, so they made an entire movie out of it. I mean, yeah, that could be what happened. It could be total bullshit. We have no idea what happened. So taking artistic license with these true stories is very common. And I did some research on the Enfield poltergeist, and they follow the story very well, which is commendable. You know, like you followed the actual account of how it happened for the most part. And the movie suffers for that, in a way, because it just feels like a very bland and very by-the-books possession movie, and I expected a little bit more out of that, because the first movie, while it did have a generic setup, there was some very good elements of it that made it more than that. It brought it to the next level. This movie, they didn't necessarily do that. And probably my biggest problem with this movie was the fact that it didn't have that many scary moments. Like, there's creepy shit in the movie, but it didn't scare me. It has a very heavy reliance on jump scares. And for those of you who don't know what jump scares are that. I personally find jump scares to be a little bit cheap if overused. I mean, a jump scare here and there is necessary. It's a horror movie. You're not going to avoid that. But if you start overusing them, and it just makes it feel lazy. And I know James Wan is capable of more. The first Conjuring, perfect example. They didn't over-rely on that. There were some genuinely creepy moments in that movie where there was no jump scare, there was no and I was sitting in my seat just like, ugh. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any terrifying moments in this movie. While they are very seldom, the couple parts in this movie that did scare me were absolutely fucking terrifying. Most of which came in the first part of the movie. The whole thing with this bitch and the first part of the movie was terrifying. I was scared shitless of this thing. But then as the movie progressed, you find out certain things. I'm not going into spoilers, but they kind of diminished this character a lot. Like, I just kept going down and down and down and down and down. So, I mean, in the beginning, it was fucking terrifying, though. I have to give the movie props for that because I was freaked the fuck out. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the first Conjuring had a very short sequence in it that I really enjoyed. It was the sequence when Patrick Wilson, Ed Warren, is talking to the father, and he's telling a story about how him and Lorraine were on a possession, and Lorraine saw something, and then she just went nuts. She locked herself in a room for 8 days and didn't say a word about it. He's like, I never asked, and I never want to know. I thought that was great. I really, really liked that scene. And I never wanted to know. I just wanted to leave it at that, like, because it makes you use your imagination a little bit. It makes you want to think, well, what the hell did she see? Hell? Did she see this? Did she see this? So we had no idea. And then this movie, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but they give you the answer to that, just like that. It's not even like they don't make anything of it. It's just said in passing, and it just ruined that. Like, why did you feel the need to do that? Like, you had this awesome thing in the first movie. Why did you have to take that and just wipe your ass with it in the second movie? It just made no sense to me. At least if you were going to capitalize on that, at least make it cool. Part of what was said before about it being generic was they took this and made it a very generic thing. So, in total, The Conjuring 2, definitely a lesser sequel than its predecessor. I had a lot of hope for it, and maybe that's why I didn't like it as much as I didn't like it. I guess I'll never know. So, out of all my ratings, unfortunately, I have to give The Conjuring 2 a Stone Cold Sober. I wish I could give it a top shelf, but I just can't. Stone Cold Sober isn't necessarily a bad rating either. It's just not a good one, nor is it a bad one. It's just totally neutral. I mean, if I went my entire life without ever watching this movie again, I'd probably be alright with that. So, did you guys see The Conjuring 2? What did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you just like it? Is it somewhere in the middle for you? Go down in the comment section below. Let me know what you thought. And tune in next week for another episode of Movies and Brews. Cheers.